if white captured this pawn with his rook, black could finish the game immediately by trading off the rooks. This rook is now pinned, we would say. White's rook cannot move because the king is behind it. The rooks would have to leave the board, and once the rooks leave the board, black is a pawn ahead. When you're a pawn ahead in king and pawn endgames, you are winning. This pawn is just going to run home or distract the white king. Also, if white had captured the pawn with his king, the same thing would happen. Black would drop the rook down and the rooks would trade, be exchanged, leaving the board, and black would win. Therefore, Magnus Carlsen doesn't take that pawn. He doesn't fall into the trap. He gives a check. Nepomniachtchi tries to trade rooks, but we see that Magnus, he just has to keep the rooks. He has to hope for the best now. I think he just has to pray. Nepomniachtchi defending his pawn with his rook there. Yeah, 2 extra pawns in rook endgames is normally enough to win.
And Magnus retreating with his rook. Okay, are we going to see Nepomniachtchi's king start to help its pawn on the left-hand side of the board?
I think Nepomniachtchi, he just needs to bring his king left. He's not rushing yet. He's just advancing his pawns on the right side. I think there's no reason not to bring his king to the left side right now. That being said, he's not rushing. That's a good thing.
That is a good thing, because there's a little motto where it says, hurry. No, it's a rush. No, hurry, don't rush.
Hurry, don't rush.
Yes.
Hurry the H-pawn?
Hurry, no, hurry. Hurry, but don't rush. Because if you rush, you can spoil things.
Yeah, and Magnus also has a lot less time now. He's got 1 minute against 2 minutes.
And Jan Nepomniachtchi also going under 2 minutes right there. I mean, this game has been so interesting. We had it all. We had it all. Oh, and look at Stockfish.
That's right. So this might be a critical moment. Black actually only has 1 move to maintain the advantage. Well, to maintain a winning advantage. He doesn't find it.
Oh.
He doesn't play the best move there.
I'm not liking this move at all.
And Stockfish doesn't like that move. Magnus Carlsen was frowning as well. But Magnus Carlsen maybe not finding the best reply, giving the advantage back to black. We saw that White's rook is shuffling across 1 square. He's trying to jump up the board and give check with his rook. He wants to attack the black king, but I think he had a safer option. He could have just kept that pawn blockaded. Black's pawn's on the right side now. He's advanced them. They look good, but they're actually weak. So I think Nepomniachtchi's last few moves, the plan wasn't great. He should have rushed his king over to the left side. Nepomniachtchi was winning.
Yes.
Still probably winning, but he needs to be ever more careful now. He's letting it slip a bit.
Yeah, no, I really agree with you, David. I think something has gone a little bit wrong with Nepomniachtchi's position, because that pawn that advanced on the right-hand side of the board, that's weak. If the white king goes back on itself and snaffles it off, suddenly it's white who also has a passed pawn in the equation. Oh, okay, so black has centralized the rook.
Magnus now under 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, and we know when a player goes under 1 minute, that means the likelihood of panic is going to increase.
Yeah, that's right. And Nepomniachtchi, okay, actually, Magnus Carlsen pushes his rook all the way up the board. I was going to say Nepomniachtchi looking calm, just taking a sip of water there. Finally, Magnus Carlsen, we talked about rooks needing to be behind pawns. Magnus, he could have done that about 20 moves ago. Instead, he finally corrects his mistake. He's trying to push his rook behind the black king, behind black's pawns. But maybe it's too late. Now black is the one pushing his rook forward to attack white's pawns. Ooh, we're going to see Magnus Carlsen try to eliminate black's pawn there on the left flank. I think that's a very good move by Magnus Carlsen.
The computer says it's a great move. Jan Nepomniachtchi is also under the minute on the clock.
That's right, Nepomniachtchi, he's letting this one slip. We said he was so in control for so long, but again, he's used to having loads of time on his clock. Now he's dropped under a minute. I think the pressure's getting to him. We saw he raised his eyebrows. He's going after white's pawns on the right side, but he's forgetting that his most important pawn is that pawn on the left there, that pawn on the B line. Once that pawn disappears... Now...
Oh, the computer hates that move. The bar says now it's a draw. What's happening?
Oh, look at that. And look at that. Magnus doesn't even capture the pawn. Instead, he gives a little check to drive the king backwards. Oh, and I think Nepomniachtchi's blown it.
He has blown it. This position... Wow. Nepomniachtchi, he will still win one of white's pawns there, white's remaining pawn. Nepomniachtchi probably will win that one, but this position is actually a well-known draw. Black will be 2 pawns ahead, but those 2 pawns, they're not connected. They're not connected to each other. They're separated. This one, it is a draw, but white needs to know what he's doing.
All right, and Magnus is now thinking, and he makes this move. Is he doing the right move here?
That's right, he's going behind with his rook now to try and check that black king. Finally, Magnus Carlsen, he's got a position that he will have studied before. I can guarantee Magnus Carlsen studied this exact endgame before, with black having 2 extra pawns, but separated pawns. Basically, all he needs to do is make sure those pawns don't advance together. White is just going to keep checking the black king from the side, from behind.
And they're very dangerous when those pawns are far advanced up the board. But at the minute, one of them is quite far back, and the second pawn that is in White's half of the board is very well guarded by the king. And I think Magnus has this completely under control. Unbelievable stuff, to be honest.
I've said it before today, and it's just not Jan Nepomniachtchi's day.
Yeah, that's right. Like,
It's looking that way.
Everything was in his favour as well. Magnus got disconnected. Magnus was flustered. He couldn't focus. He was just angry with the position. Bad situation on the clock, bad situation on the board.
2 pawns down with a very straightforward plan. I find this quite shocking.
That's right. Nepomniachtchi, he just forgot that his pride and joy was this pawn on the left flank, and he just let it be traded off. He's left himself with 2 pawns, but White's king will easily deal with those pawns. Yeah, this is very, very surprising stuff. Nepomniachtchi, he will be able to advance another pawn here. We see him push a pawn. The problem is now there's just no way of making progress. He has to give up 1 pawn to get the other one running. But 1 pawn in a rook endgame is not enough. Here, black's rook is paralyzed, trapped in the corner, defending his own pawn.
Yeah.
Rook is passive. This position will end up in a dead-drawn endgame. Black can't get one of those pawns down to the end. It's close, but not close enough.
And Nepomniachtchi is thinking, is there anything else he can do here? Is this
He cannot keep that pawn that the king watches so closely. I mean, because the rook is so passive. The rook needs to mobilize itself. But okay, the rook has mobilized in this case, and Magnus will take off that pawn. And now, okay, so we are going to see a lovely technique by Magnus Carlsen. So I suspect that his rook will now get behind the pawn.
Look at Nepomniachtchi. He looks so sad. Like, it's just...
Yeah, he's had 2 excellent shots, and he hasn't been able to put the ball in the net.
That's right, twice in a row. And we see Magnus Carlsen just repeating the position there. He's going to use his rook to start checking the black king sooner or later. This is a very well-known draw. Black only has 1 pawn left, and that pawn will not be allowed to advance the whole way. White's just going to keep giving checks. Sometimes he can even offer to trade rooks White now, because 1 pawn on its own isn't enough.
So Nepomniachtchi is trying hard by advancing this king, but notice how Magnus Carlsen is using his king and his rook to stop that pawn advancing. Remember, in endgames, it is David Howell's favourite expression, teamwork makes the dream work, and you have to remember that.
That's right, and both White's rook and king covering the same square, covering the pawn advance. Nepomniachtchi there just shuffling his rook across. That move actually doesn't do anything. It's a waiting move.
And now the white rook has come to gobble up the white pawn, and we are going to see, I think the players agree, a very quick draw.
That's right. Nepomniachtchi, you can tell on his face.
Yep.
He knows it's over. He's laughing to himself. He's missed another opportunity. 2nd game in a row. He had it in the bag. Just nerves, the clock, everything just made him...
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I think he was trying to maximise his position. He knew the plan, but he just wanted to improve absolutely everything before the king made its dash to the left-hand side of the board. And I think that was basically his failing. He pushed too hard.
Yeah, I said it in the match against Anish Giri. Magnus, don't get him in the endgame. He knows all the tricks. He's a magician. He will escape somehow by hook or by crook. And another piece of escapism, an escape act there from Magnus Carlsen. Impressive defence.
And how is Jan Nepomniachtchi feeling now? Another game he is winning, and then just not able to get the ball in the net, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, I can probably... Yes, I can even verbalise what he's saying. Man, come on, give me a break. No, I mean, he knows...
devastated. Really.
He knows there were 2 points there up for grabs, and he didn't do it. He bottled it.